She stood amidst the glitziest crowd in Chicago, and no one looked at her. Not because she was invisible, but because the man she had given her heart to was standing right in front of her, surrounded by hundreds of strangers, and every word he uttered felt like a knife cutting into her flesh. But in the darkness of the library that night, one person heard it all. And that person wasn't the forgiving kind. Like and comment the city you're viewing so I know how far this story has come. Don't go anywhere, because everything is about to change completely. The dress was the wrong choice. Serena Vale knew it the moment she stepped out of the cab and felt the October wind cut through the thin silk, like it had a personal grudge. The fabric was deep navy, the kind of color that was supposed to read sophisticated at a distance, but only worked if you had the kind of figure the dress was designed around. She'd bought it 6 weeks ago in a moment of optimism she hadn't earned. She'd told herself she looked good. She'd stood in the fitting room mirror under fluorescent lighting and made herself believe it. Standing now at the base of the Harrington Mansion's stone steps, watching women in gowns that probably cost more than her monthly rent float past her without a single glance, she felt that optimism drain out through the soles of her heels and into the cold Chicago sidewalk. She almost got back in the cab. The driver had already pulled away. So she straightened her spine, gripped her small clutch with both hands, and walked up the steps. The Whitmore Foundation Gala was the kind of event that existed to remind certain people exactly where they stood. Not on the guest list because of talent, not because of work, because of connection, because of bloodline, because of the invisible architecture of Chicago's upper crust that had been built over generations and did not particularly welcome newcomers. Serena was here because her firm, Elevate PR, had spent 8 months rehabilitating the Whitmore Foundation's image after a board member's embezzlement scandal. She'd done the work. She'd earned the invite. She still felt like a trespasser. The ballroom was everything the exterior promised. Vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers that threw prismatic light across 200 people who all seemed to know exactly where to stand and how to hold their champagne. A string quartet in the corner played something classical that Serena couldn't name. Waitstaff moved through the crowd like they were choreographed, silver trays balanced on fingertips, faces arranged into pleasant blankness. Serena took a glass of champagne from the nearest tray and did not drink it. She held it because holding something gave her hands a purpose. She scanned the room out of professional habit, mapping exits, identifying clusters, noting who was talking to whom. It was the same instinct that made her good at her job. Read the room before the room reads you. She spotted Marcus Whitmore near the fireplace, laughing at something an older man in a tuxedo was saying. She'd need to speak with him at some point, remind him gently that the Foundation's quarterly report was due for release and she needed his sign-off on the language by Thursday. Not yet. Give him an hour with his guests first. She moved toward the edge of the room, where a set of tall windows overlooked the mansion's east garden. The garden was dark, the hedgerows cut into precise geometric shapes that she could barely make out against the October sky. She stood there and watched the room through the window's reflection and thought about how much easier it was to observe people when they didn't know you were doing it. Serena! The voice hit her somewhere between the shoulder blades, a cold, specific pressure. She'd know that voice in a burning building. She turned. Grant Mercer looked exactly the way she remembered him, and somehow worse. He was wearing a charcoal tuxedo that had been cut to emphasize exactly the kind of broad-shouldered, lean-waisted silhouette that made people in rooms like this one treat you like you belonged. His dark hair was styled with the effortless precision of someone who spent 45 minutes achieving effortlessness. He was holding a glass of scotch, and he was smiling, and the smile did not reach anywhere near his eyes. Beside him stood a woman Serena didn't recognize, late 20s, blonde, wearing a white gown so architecturally precise it looked like it had been engineered rather than sewn. She had the particular stillness of someone who had learned very young that beauty was a currency and had invested accordingly. "Grant!" Serena kept her voice level. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I'm always here." He said it like a fact of geography. The Mercers had chaired the Whitmore Foundation's investment committee for 11 years. Of course he was here. She'd known that and come anyway, which meant something about her she didn't particularly want to examine right now. "This is Claudia," he said, gesturing toward the blonde woman without looking at her. "Claudia Ashworth. We're engaged." The word landed with surgical precision. Serena looked at the woman, Claudia, and offered her hand. Congratulations, I'm Serena. We went to Wentworth together. She paused. Grant and I mean. Claudia shook her hand with the specific limp grip of someone who had decided the interaction wasn't worth the energy. She glanced at Grant with the look that contained an entire private conversation Serena wasn't part of. I'm going to find Margaret. She wanted to talk about the Vale house. And then she drifted away like smoke, and Serena was alone with her ex-fiancé in the middle of a ballroom where every second person probably knew their history. You look, Grant started. Don't. He stopped, tilted his head slightly. The smile stayed. I was going to say you look like you're working. You always look like you're working, even when you're not supposed to be. I'm always supposed to be. This is a client event. Right. He nodded slowly, the way he used to nod when he was arranging something in his head that he hadn't decided to say yet. She recognized it. She'd spent 2 years learning to recognize all of his tells and then another year trying to forget she knew them. How's the firm? Fine. I heard you lost the Kellner account. She had. She still felt sick about it. Where'd you hear that? Chicago's a small city. He shrugged one shoulder. I also heard you've been handling the Whitmore cleanup. That's good work. Messy situation. Not everyone could have managed the optics. It sounded like a compliment. It was shaped like a compliment. But something in the delivery, the slight emphasis on not everyone, landed differently than the words themselves. She'd noticed that about Grant 1,000 times when they were together, and only once, near the end, had she made the mistake of naming it out loud. He'd looked at her like she was being hysterical. Thank you, she said. I should go check in with Marcus. She took one step toward the center of the room and Grant shifted slightly, not blocking her, just repositioning, enough to make the path feel less clear. You've put on weight, he said. The words arrived quietly, almost conversationally. The string quartet was between pieces, and the nearest guests were 20 feet away and absorbed in their own discussions. But the brief silence of the room meant that anyone within earshot would have heard it perfectly. Serena stopped. What? I'm not... He held up a hand, the scotch glass catching light. I'm not being cruel. I'm just saying. I noticed. You look softer, less put together than you used to be. I don't think that dress is doing you any favors, honestly. He said it with a slight furrow of concern, like he was a doctor reading her chart, like he was doing her a service. I know it's been a hard couple of years. It shows. There was a woman nearby, mid-50s, silver hair, dripping in jewelry, who had gone very still. She wasn't looking at them, but she wasn't not looking at them either. That specific cocktail party performance of witnessing something while pretending to witness nothing. Serena felt her face go warm. She felt the precise, humiliating awareness of her body that only specific cruelty can trigger, the sudden consciousness of the space she occupied, the fabric stretched across her hips, the way she was standing, whether her arms looked like her arms or like something to be assessed. She felt herself recalibrating, the way a person recalibrates when they step wrong on uneven ground, the sick lurch of it. Grant. She said his name very carefully. I'm serious. I still care about you. I think you should take better care of yourself. You're not 25 anymore, and these rooms, he glanced around with a small, rueful gesture, these rooms are not forgiving. I'm going to go find Marcus now. Her voice came out quieter than she intended, smaller. She hated that. She turned and walked. She did not run. She would not run. She counted her steps and kept her shoulders back and breathed through her nose and navigated the edge of the ballroom with the specific terrible composure of someone who has decided they will not fall apart until they find somewhere private to do it. The library. She remembered it from a site visit 6 months ago. A room off the main corridor, dark wood and floor-to-ceiling shelves, almost never used during events because it was positioned away from the ballroom and the catering circuits. She found the door, found it unlocked, pushed inside. Dark. The only light came from the tall windows, Chicago's ambient glow pushing through the glass, catching the spines of books, the brass fittings of a rolling ladder that ran along the shelves on a brass track. Serena closed the door behind her. She stood very still for a moment. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. She pressed the back of one hand against her mouth, not because she was going to cry. She refused to cry over Grant Mercer in the middle of a work event. She refused, but because she needed to feel the pressure of something solid, something real. Her stomach hurt. She thought about the dress, the fitting room, the optimism she hadn't earned. She thought about the silver-haired woman going still. She thought about Claudia Ashworth's engineered white gown and her limp handshake and the way Grant had introduced her like she was a point being made. She set her champagne glass down on the edge of a reading table with slightly too much force. The glass didn't break. She was almost disappointed. She crossed to the window and stood with her back to the room and looked out at the dark garden and let herself have 30 seconds of it. The heat in her face, the specific ugliness of having been humiliated in a room full of people who would remember it, the fact that some part of her had known the moment she saw him that something like this would happen, and she'd come anyway. "He's wrong, you know?" The voice came from the far end of the room. Serena spun around so fast she nearly knocked the champagne glass off the table. A man was sitting in the leather chair in the corner. She hadn't seen him when she came in. The chair was positioned partly behind a floor lamp that wasn't on, tucked into the angle where two shelves met. He was wearing black suit, no tie, white shirt open at the collar. And he was very still in the particular way that large, dangerous things are still. Not the stillness of rest, the stillness of deliberate restraint. She couldn't see his face clearly, just the shape of him, the breadth of his shoulders, and the fact that his posture had the specific quality of someone who had been sitting there for a long time before she arrived and had no particular intention of moving. "Who are you?" she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Someone who was here first." A pause. "And someone who heard everything he said to you." The heat in her face changed registers. I wasn't." She stopped. There was no salvageable version of this. She pressed her lips together. "How long have you been in here?" "Long enough." "I didn't see you." "Most people don't." He said it without any particular satisfaction. Just fact. She picked up the champagne glass, mostly so her hands had something to do. "You should know that was a private conversation." The room didn't feel private. He made sure of that. She opened her mouth and closed it again. "He said it quietly," she said. "He always does. That's the—" She stopped herself. She was explaining Grant Mercer's cruelty to a stranger in a dark library at a charity gala, and that was simply not something she was willing to do. "I'm sorry. I'm going to go." "You don't have to apologize." "I wasn't apologizing to you. It was a general, She exhaled. "Who are you?" He leaned forward slightly, and the ambient light from the window caught enough of his face that she could see him clearly for the first time. He was somewhere in his early 40s, maybe. Dark hair, the kind of jaw that looked like it had been put through things. A scar. Small, thin, the shape of a crescent moon, just below his left cheekbone. His eyes were dark, and they were looking at her with an expression she couldn't immediately classify. It wasn't pity. It wasn't the particular condescending warmth of a man who wants you to know he's one of the good ones. It was something more direct than that, more serious. "Damien Moretti," he said. The name moved through her like a current. She knew the name. Everyone in Chicago knew the name. You knew it the way you knew the name of a storm system. Not from direct experience, necessarily, but from the way people's behavior changed around it. Damien Moretti. The Moretti Group. Hotels, development, transportation, and the heavily documented suspicion that all of those things were superimposed over something considerably less legitimate. His name appeared in newspaper articles that were always carefully hedged. Alleged. Reportedly. Sources close to the investigation. He'd never been indicted. He'd never been convicted. He'd never, to her knowledge, attended a Whitmore Foundation gala. "You're Damien Moretti," she said. "I just said that." "Why are you at this event?" "Same reason most people are at most events." He reached toward the side table and picked up a glass of amber liquid she hadn't noticed before. "Obligation with a better dress code." She stared at him. He looked back at her with the equanimity of a man who was very comfortable being stared at and had made peace with it a long time ago. "You should know," she said. That if you're planning to use what you overheard in any way, I'm not. The words were quiet and absolute. No additional justification, just the statement, flat and final, as if the possibility wasn't worth the breath required to fully dismiss it. She didn't know why she believed him. She did. He was my fiancé, she said. 2 years ago. I don't know why I'm telling you that. Because it matters to the story. There isn't a story. There's always a story. He set his glass down. He called you an embarrassment. He said you were putting on weight in front of people who know both of you. He dressed it up as concern. A pause. The directness of it hit her somewhere she hadn't expected. That's not concern. That's a man who needs other people to be smaller so he can feel large. Something shifted in the back of her throat. You don't know him? She said. I don't need to. I know the type. She should have been annoyed by the certainty of that. She found that she wasn't. She found that there was something almost, not comforting, that wasn't the right word, something almost stabilizing about the flatness of his assessment, like having someone put into plain language a thing she'd been trying to translate for years. I'm fine, she said. You're not. He said it without cruelty. But you will be. That's different. She looked at him for a long moment. The library was very quiet. Through the closed door, she could hear, faintly, the swell of the string quartet returning to a new piece, the party continuing without her. I came in here to collect myself, she said, not to be analyzed. I know. He stood. He was taller than she'd expected, the kind of height that reorganized the proportions of the room slightly. He reached for his jacket, which had been folded over the arm of the chair beside him, and put it on with the economy of movement of someone who doesn't perform things. I'll leave you to it. He was almost to the door. He's going to be out there, she said, when I go back. Moretti stopped. He turned to look at her over his shoulder. Yes, he said, he will be. And everyone who was nearby is going to have that conversation filed somewhere in their memory. She was saying this out loud because saying it out loud was the only way to get it out of her head. And the next time they see me, they're going to think about it. Some of them. He turned fully to face her again. Some people in that room will have forgotten it before dessert. Some of them will remember it for exactly as long as it serves them socially, and then they'll forget that too. A very small number will have found it interesting enough to store. He paused. None of that changes what's true about you. You don't know what's true about me. No, he agreed, but I know what's not. He looked at her steadily. Whatever he told you you are, that's not it. Serena was quiet. Walk back out there with me, he said. She blinked. What? Walk back into the ballroom with me. Not because it proves anything, not to make a point, just because you're not someone who hides in a library and you know it, and staying in here gives him something he hasn't earned. I'm not hiding. I know. Something at the corner of his mouth shifted, not quite a smile, just an acknowledgement of the specific polite fiction she was constructing and his decision not to challenge it further. She looked at the door. She looked at Damien Moretti, who was standing in a dark library in a house full of Chicago's most carefully assembled social machinery, and she thought about the fact that she had come here because she'd done the work, and she had earned this room, and Grant Mercer had spent approximately 4 minutes this evening trying to take that from her. She picked up her champagne glass. Fine, she said. She walked to the door, and he fell into step beside her, and she did not look at him again until they were in the hallway, where the light was warmer and the sound of the party was louder, and she could feel, with each step, the strange compressed steadiness of having someone walk next to you who does not need you to explain yourself. They entered the ballroom through the main corridor. The change was immediate. She felt it before she understood it, a shift in the ambient attention of the room. Not dramatic. Nothing so obvious as heads turning all at once, more like a pressure change. The subtle recalibration of a crowd's collective awareness when something significant has entered their field of perception. Conversations didn't stop. They adjusted. Eyes moved without appearing to move. The particular social sonar of 200 people in a room picking up a signal and beginning quietly to triangulate. Serena understood, in a way she hadn't fully until this moment, exactly who Damien Moretti was to this room. She felt him beside her. Not touching her, they were not touching, but occupying the space next to her with a gravity that was simply a fact of his presence, like a weather system, like something that redirected the flow of the room around it. Marcus Whitmore appeared in her peripheral vision. He was looking at her, or rather, he was looking at who she was walking with, and then looking at her. And something in his expression had shifted from the genial detachment he'd been wearing all evening into something considerably more attentive. A woman near the champagne station said something quietly to the man beside her. The man glanced over once, then looked carefully away. And then she saw Grant. He was standing near the fireplace, exactly where she'd seen Marcus earlier. Claudia was beside him again, her white gown catching firelight. Grant was mid-sentence with a man she didn't recognize, someone with the particular bearing of money that had been in one family long enough to become invisible to its owners. Grant's eyes found her. She watched him process it in real time. The sequence of it. Serena. Registered, dismissed, moved on. And then the person walking beside her. And then the second registration, harder and different in quality. The slight tensing of his jaw. The way his hand, holding the Scotch glass, went very still. Damian Moretti did not acknowledge Grant Mercer. He didn't look at him. He didn't alter his pace or the angle of his attention. He said something to a man who'd appeared at his side. A compact, quiet-looking man in a dark suit who seemed to have materialized from nowhere, in a voice too low for Serena to catch, and the man nodded and disappeared. "He's looking at us," Serena said quietly. "Yes." "You're not going to look back at him?" "No." "Why not?" "Because he already knows I'm here." A pause. "That's enough for now." She didn't ask what he meant by that. Something in her gut suggested she already understood, and that there were dimensions to what she understood that she probably shouldn't examine too closely in a ballroom full of people. She spent the next 90 minutes doing what she'd come to do. She found Marcus, confirmed the Thursday deadline, navigated his good-natured anxiety about the language in paragraph 3 of the press release, and extracted a commitment. She spoke to the Foundation's legal counsel about the donor communication timeline. She ate exactly 3 of the past appetizers and refused a second glass of champagne because she needed to be sharp, and also because accepting it would have meant slowing down, and slowing down meant having to feel the full weight of the evening. She was aware, throughout all of this, of Damian Moretti in the room. Not in the way you're aware of someone you're watching, in the way you're aware of something structural. A column in a building, a fact of the architecture. He moved through the evening the way water moves through a landscape, around things, between things, finding the path of least resistance, while somehow determining the shape of everything it touched. He spoke to perhaps 5 people all night. They all came to him. He never went to them. Grant left at 9:15. She didn't see him go. She only noticed the absence of that specific pressure at the edge of her awareness that had been there since he'd said what he'd said. And she realized when it lifted how much energy she'd been spending holding herself together around it. She was collecting her coat from the cloakroom. It was 10 o'clock. She'd stayed longer than she'd planned, long enough that staying no longer felt like running, when she heard his voice behind her. "Your car?" She turned. Moretti was standing at the cloakroom entrance, jacket still on, hands in his pockets. "Cab," she said. "My driver will take you." She shook her head. "That's not necessary." "It's October," he said. "It's 34 degrees. The cab wait is 40 minutes. He paused. "It's not an imposition. He's already waiting." She looked at him. He looked back. "Why?" she asked. He considered the question with apparent seriousness, as if it deserved it. "Because you handled yourself with more dignity tonight than most people manage in a year, and the least I can do is make sure you're warm on the way home." She didn't know what to say to that. She put on her coat. The car was a black SUV, clean, quiet, smelling of leather and nothing else. The driver was the same compact, quiet man from earlier. He opened the door for her without speaking and closed it behind her without ceremony. Moretti got in on the other side. She looked at him. "I assumed you meant your driver would take me." "He is taking you." A pause. "I'm along for the ride." You can tell me your address and I'll have him drop you first." She looked out the window at Chicago sliding past. The river, the bridges, the buildings stacked and glittering. She'd lived here her whole adult life, and there were still moments where the city felt completely foreign to her, like a room she kept walking into and discovering was larger than she'd thought. "What happened to Grant tonight?" she asked. Or, "What's going to happen?" "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." She turned to look at him. "When you said consequences always follow, in the library when you talked about the type, that wasn't just, you weren't speaking academically." He was quiet for a moment. "Grant Mercer is going to experience some difficulties in the coming days," he said finally. "Some of them will be connected to decisions he's made over a long period of time that have finally caught up with him. Some of them he will find very surprising. And some of them you'll arrange." He didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it. He looked at her with that same flat, direct attention. "He has a history that extends well beyond what he said to you tonight. What's coming for him is earned." "I don't need you to avenge me," she said. "I want you to understand that clearly." "I do understand that." "Then, what happens to Grant Mercer isn't about you," he said. "Not primarily. You are the reason I paid close attention tonight. But what I know about him goes back further than this evening." He paused. "Does that distinction matter to you?" She thought about it. "I don't know yet." "Fair." The car slowed at a red light. Outside, a group of people in coats were laughing at something on one of their phones, their breath making small clouds in the cold air. Normal people having a normal evening. The world continuing its ordinary business around the extraordinary and terrible things that happen inside it constantly and without announcement. "I don't know what you want from me," Serena said. "Nothing tonight." He said it simply. "Tonight I wanted you to walk back into that room. You did. And tomorrow," he reached into his jacket and produced a card. Not a business card, just a card. Heavy stock, cream-colored, a phone number in clean type. No name, no company, just the number. "Tomorrow is a question I'll let you decide whether to ask." She took the card. She looked at it for a long moment. The weight of it in her fingers was the specific weight of a decision that couldn't be unmade. "My building's on Winthrop," she said. "North side." The driver already seemed to know. They rode the rest of the way in silence that was not uncomfortable. When they reached her building, a narrow pre-war walk-up with a lobby that smelled perpetually of old radiators and someone else's cooking, the driver stopped and got out and opened her door before she'd finished gathering her things. She stepped out. The night air was brutal, 34 degrees like he'd said, with a wind off the lake that made it feel like less. She turned back to look at Moretti through the open door. He was still in the car, still in his seat, watching her with the same patient directness. "What kind of man arranges destruction for someone else and calls it justice?" she said. "The kind who's been watching people like Grant Mercer take things from people like you for a very long time," he said, and got tired of waiting for someone else to stop it. She held his gaze for a moment longer. "Good night, Mr. Moretti." "Good night, Miss Vale." She walked into her building. She didn't look back. She stood in the elevator and watched the doors close and then pressed the button for the 4th floor and stared at the wall and felt the card in her hand, felt its weight, felt the particular specific gravity of an evening that had started as an obligation and become something she did not yet have language for. She went inside. She hung up her coat. She sat down on the couch in the navy dress that had been the wrong choice and looked at the card and at the ceiling and at the dark window that showed her the faint orange reflection of Chicago's nighttime sky. She thought about what Moretti had said. "You're not someone who hides in a library, and you know it." She thought about Grant's face when he'd processed who was standing beside her, the specific quality of his stillness, the Scotch glass going quiet in his hand. She set the card on the coffee table. She didn't throw it away. She had just made herself tea and changed into sweats, and was sitting at her kitchen table with her laptop open and the Whitmore quarterly report draft on the screen when her phone buzzed. A news alert. One of the Chicago financial blogs she followed. Mercer. Financial partners. Federal inquiry opened into offshore holdings. She read it twice. Her tea went cold. She picked up the card. The news alert was still on her phone screen when she woke up the next morning, and for approximately 4 seconds she thought she'd dreamed the whole evening. The gala, the library, the car ride, the card sitting on her coffee table like an unexploded device. Then she sat up and saw the card, and the 4 seconds ended. She made coffee. She opened her laptop. She pulled up every financial news outlet she followed, and the picture that assembled itself across 6 different articles was consistent in its broad strokes and increasingly specific in its detail. Federal investigators had opened a formal inquiry into Mercer Financial Partners' offshore holding structures. 3 of the firm's institutional clients had already issued statements indicating they were reviewing their relationships with the firm pending clarification. A source described as close to the investigation the specific, careful phrasing of reporters who've been told enough to print something but not enough to name anyone, had indicated that the inquiry had been in development for several months and that yesterday's action represented the opening of a formal phase that would likely involve document subpoenas and account freezes. Grant's name appeared in every article, always in the context of the firm bearing his name, always with the specific careful hedge of alleged and reportedly and under investigation, which meant nothing legally and everything reputationally. Serena read all of it and felt nothing that surprised her. That was the part she kept returning to while she showered and dressed and ate half a piece of toast standing over her kitchen sink. Not the news itself. The absence of surprise. She'd known Grant Mercer for 4 years and been engaged to him for 14 months of those 4 years, and she'd always known, in the specific wordless way that you sometimes know things you can't prove and wouldn't know how to say, that the scaffolding of his perfect life had a load-bearing element that couldn't withstand direct examination. She told herself she was being paranoid. He'd told her she was being paranoid. The word paranoid, she'd learned over those 14 months, has a way of making the person using it sound reasonable and the person receiving it sound unstable, which is useful if you're trying to maintain something you don't want examined too closely. She stood at her window with her coffee and looked at Winthrop Avenue in the gray October morning and thought about the card. She did not pick it up. She went to work. Elevate PR occupied the 7th floor of a building on Michigan Avenue that was newer than it looked and more expensive than it should have been for a firm of their size. But the address mattered in this business, and the partners had made the calculation 12 years ago that it would pay for itself in perception value. So far, they'd been right. Serena had been with the firm for 8 of those 12 years, made partner at 31, and now ran the crisis communications practice, which was a polite way of saying that when someone powerful did something catastrophic, they called her. She got to her desk at 7:48. Her assistant Priya was already at her station, which meant something was already wrong. 3 calls from Marcus Whitmore's office, Priya said, following her through the door. Starting at 7:15, his EA says it's urgent but wouldn't specify. Also, Lena wants to talk to you before the 9 o'clock. And there's a woman in the small conference room who doesn't have an appointment and won't leave. She said she's a friend of yours. Serena stopped. A friend of mine. She said her name is Angela. She said you'd know who she was. Angela Reyes. Serena did know who she was. Angela was a financial journalist at the Chicago Tribune who'd broken 3 of the last 5 major white-collar crime stories in the city and who had been, 6 years ago, the closest thing Serena had to a best friend before the diverging trajectories of their careers and the specific geography of adult life had reduced their friendship to occasional texts and twice-yearly dinners, where they spent the first 40 minutes catching up and the next hour pretending they weren't 2 fundamentally different people than they'd been when the friendship was forged. She dropped her bag at her desk. Get me Marcus's EA back. Tell Lena I need 15 minutes first. And get Angela whatever she wants to drink. She went to the small conference room. Angela Reyes was 41 and looked it in the specific way that people who've been paying attention to the world look their age. Not badly, but honestly. Her hair was cut short, and she was wearing the kind of practical blazer that said, I dress for what I'm doing, not what I want people to think I'm doing. She was standing at the window with her arms crossed, and she turned when Serena came in, and the expression on her face was the particular expression of someone who has information and is trying to figure out how much of it they're allowed to use. Close the door, Angela said. Serena closed it. When did you start running in Moretti's circle? Angela said. Serena set her coffee down on the conference table. Good morning to you too. I'm serious, Serena. I saw the photos this morning. I'm looking at them right now. She held up her phone. There was a photo on the screen taken apparently by someone with a camera positioned at the ballroom entrance. It was slightly blurry with the specific quality of a long lens in low light, but it was clear enough. Her and Moretti entering the ballroom. His posture, hers, the way the space around them looked. "We walked into a room together," Serena said. I met him last night. I'd never spoken to him before." "The photo doesn't look like you've never spoken to him before." "Then the photo is misleading. Photos aren't the thing I'm worried about." Angela set the phone down. She uncrossed her arms and put both hands flat on the conference table and leaned slightly forward in the way she used to do when she was about to say something she'd been workshopping in her head on the drive over. "I have been working a piece on Moretti's operation for 14 months. 14 months, Serena. I have sources inside 3 separate federal investigations that all have his name somewhere in the architecture. Every time we get close enough to actually write the thing, something happens. A source goes quiet. A document that was available isn't anymore. Once, a source physically relocated, not metaphorically, moved cities." "Angela, I'm telling you this because I like you, and because last night you apparently walked into a room next to this man, and whoever was there with a camera sent that photo to at least 4 different people I know of before 10 o'clock. Serena was quiet. "What do you know about him?" Angela said. "Actually, no, not what everyone says." "I know what everyone says." "That's not—" "Okay." Angela straightened, rubbed one hand across her forehead. "He came up in the Moretti family, which has been in Chicago since the 1960s. Started in dock workers' unions and moved into construction and transportation, and then over about 15 years, under Damien specifically, into legitimate development and hospitality and investment, which is the structure that let them clean things up on paper." She said it with the practiced efficiency of someone who had given this background to editors too many times. "The legitimate stuff is real. The hotels are real. The development is real. But the infrastructure underneath, the people he knows, the favors owed, the mechanisms for making things happen or not happen in this city, that is not something that got cleaned up with the corporate restructuring." "What are you asking me, Angela?" "I'm asking you what you're doing." "I'm not doing anything. I met him at an event. He offered me a ride home. I took it." Angela looked at her for a long moment. "Grant Mercer's firm is being investigated by federal authorities this morning." "I saw." "Moretti was at the same event as Mercer last night." "So were 200 other people?" 200 other people didn't get photographed walking next to you." Angela picked up her phone. "I'm not writing a story about you. That's not what this is. But I need you to understand the context you stepped into last night, because I don't think you do." Serena thought about the card on her coffee table, the weight of it in her fingers in the car. The way Moretti had said what happens to Grant Mercer isn't about you, not primarily. "I appreciate the concern," she said, "genuinely, but I know how to take care of myself." Famous last words. Angela said it without heat, just tiredness. The specific tiredness of someone who has watched competent people walk into complicated situations with the sincere confidence that competence was sufficient armor. She picked up her coffee from the table. "I need to call Marcus Whitmore back. Can we have dinner this week?" "Actually have it. Not reschedule it." Angela looked at her. "Yeah," she said. "We can have dinner." "I'll call you." She left the conference room and went to her desk and called Marcus Whitmore's office and spent 45 minutes talking him off a ledge about the optics of the foundation's continued association with certain donors given the morning's news, because 2 of the foundation's investment committee members had secondary business relationships with Mercer Financial, and Marcus was, quite reasonably, experiencing the specific panic of a man who had done nothing wrong and understood that this did not protect him from being adjacent to someone who had. She managed him carefully. She drafted language for a brief statement clarifying the foundation's independent governance structure. She set up a call with the legal team for Thursday morning. By the time she got off the phone, the Mercer story had grown 2 more articles and a cable segment, and Grant's firm had released a statement through their own PR team. Not her, he'd gone with someone else, which was fine, which was completely fine, that said all the right things and would not help at all. She was reviewing the statement's language with the detached professional instinct of someone analyzing a losing chess position when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She answered, "Ms. Vale?" The voice was a woman's, smooth, professionally neutral. "Mr. Moretti would like to know if you're available for dinner on Thursday evening. He apologizes for the short notice and would understand completely if you're unavailable." Serena leaned back in her chair. "Thursday?" she said. "Yes." "Where?" "A private dining room at Aurelius on the 42nd floor. Mr. Moretti has the room reserved from 8 o'clock. She knew Aurelius. Everyone in Chicago knew Aurelius. It was the kind of restaurant that required a connection to get a reservation at all. And the private dining room on 42 wasn't something she'd known existed, which meant it existed for people who didn't need to know it was there until they needed it. "Tell Mr. Moretti yes," she said. She hung up. She stared at her desk for approximately 30 seconds. She picked up her phone again and called Priya in and asked her to move Thursday's 7:30 client call to Friday morning and did not explain why. The rest of the week moved with the specific uneven rhythm of a news cycle eating something alive. The Mercer story grew. On Tuesday morning came the account freeze. 3 offshore entities, reported by the Tribune in a piece bylined to someone other than Angela, which Serena noted. On Tuesday afternoon, Claudia Ashworth's mother gave a brief statement to a Society columnist, not a hard news outlet, a Society columnist, which was its own specific register of damage, confirming that Claudia and Grant were, quote, taking time apart to focus on their individual priorities. By Wednesday, 2 of the 3 institutional clients who'd issued preliminary statements had formally suspended their relationships with Mercer Financial Partners. The firm's managing partner, a man named Doyle who'd been with the company for 19 years, gave a press conference that lasted 11 minutes and answered approximately nothing. Serena watched all of it from a professional distance that was not entirely professional. She thought about what Moretti had said in the car. What's coming for him is earned. She thought about the silver-haired woman at the gala going still. She thought about Claudia Ashworth's limp handshake and the white gown and taking time apart to focus on individual priorities. She did not feel satisfaction, exactly. It was a more complicated thing than that. It was the specific feeling of watching a structure that you'd known was unsound finally admit to itself what it was, and finding that the admission was both less dramatic and more thorough than you'd expected. On Wednesday evening, her phone rang. Not the unknown number. Her personal cell. A number she recognized. Grant. She let it ring. It went to voicemail. She didn't listen to the voicemail for 2 hours, and when she did, it was because she was standing in her kitchen making dinner and her thumb slipped. His voice sounded different, not different in quality. It was the same voice, the same particular cadence she'd spent 2 years learning to read. Different in register. The specific compressing quality of a man's voice when he is frightened and has not yet decided whether to admit it. "Serena, it's Grant. I know you've seen the news. I think there are some things that need to be said, and I'd rather say them in person. Call me back when you can. Please. Please." She played the message again just to hear the please, not from cruelty, from genuine disorientation. In 2 years and 14 months of engagement, she could count on one hand the times Grant Mercer had said please, in a way that meant it, rather than in a way that performed the meaning of it. She deleted the message. She went back to making dinner. Thursday arrived with the specific quality of days that contain something you're moving toward without quite acknowledging the direction of your movement. She got through her morning, got through a 2 o'clock with a new client, a tech CFO who'd said something stupid in a podcast interview and needed help managing the fallout. Got through Priya asking 3 times if she needed anything before 5 o'clock with the tone of someone who can tell her boss is somewhere else in her head. She went home. She changed. She stood in front of her closet for longer than she had since the night she'd stood in front of it, trying to decide on the navy dress that was the wrong choice. She chose differently this time. A deep burgundy wrap dress that she'd owned for 2 years and worn exactly once to a friend's wedding and had thought about getting rid of twice. She put it on and stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself for a measured amount of time and then looked away and did not return to the mirror. She took a cab to Aurelius. The restaurant's main floor was what you'd expect from the address and the reputation. But the private elevator to the 42nd floor was something else. Smaller, walnut-paneled, operated by a man in a dark uniform who rode it with her without speaking and stepped out at the top to show her through a short corridor and a set of glass doors. The room was not large. That was the first thing she registered. She'd expected the scale of corporate excess, a table for 12, ornate fixtures, the self-advertisement of money that needed to be seen. Instead, it was intimate. A table for two, positioned at the window that took up the full exterior wall. Chicago below them in every direction, 42 floors down, the grid of it glittering and immense and somehow, from up here, comprehensible in a way it never was from street level. Moretti was standing at the window. He turned when she came in. He looked. She took the inventory with the same clinical instinct she brought to every room she walked into. Like a man who was used to being waited for and had used the time productively rather than impatiently. He was wearing dark charcoal, no tie, the same open collar she'd seen at the gala. The scar below his left cheekbone caught the light from below. He had a glass of something in his hand and he set it on the table when she came in. "You came," he said. "I said I would." People say things. I don't. She crossed the room and he pulled out her chair and she sat, and he sat across from her, and for a moment neither of them spoke, because the city below was doing enough. "How was your week?" he said. "You know how my week was." A slight pause. "Some of it." "Grant called me Wednesday night." She picked up the water glass that was already poured. Voicemail. He sounded, she considered the word, compressed. "His firm lost its third institutional client this morning," Moretti said. "I saw." "His managing partner is going to resign before end of week. The firm's counsel has informed him they can't continue to represent both the entity and the individual if the investigation formalizes charges, which it will." He said this the way someone reads a weather report, not without feeling, but with the detachment of someone describing things that have already been decided. He's also being sued by the Vance family, separately, for approximately $4 million in structured investment losses that his firm managed in ways that were not quite what was disclosed in their agreement. Serena set the water glass down. "The Vance family. As in Margaret Vance." "Yes." She thought about Claudia Ashworth at the gala. She wanted to find Margaret. She wanted to talk about the Vale House. The casual ease of that sentence, the total absence of any awareness that the ground she was standing on had already started moving. "You arranged that too?" Serena said. The Vance lawsuit is something the Vance family's attorneys identified independently when they began reviewing their portfolio. He met her eyes. "I may have suggested they conduct that review." She looked at him. "How much of what's happening to him is things you've arranged, and how much is things that were already there?" "About 30% arrangement," he said. "The rest was already there. He built it himself over a long time. I simply identified the structural weaknesses and introduced the appropriate pressure at the right points." "And the people who depended on his firm, the employees who are going to lose their jobs because the thing collapses?" It wasn't an angry question, it was a real one. She wanted to see how he handled it. He was quiet for a moment. "Doyle, the managing partner, is a clean operator who spent 19 years attached to something dirty without knowing the full extent of it. I've made sure he knows what's coming far enough in advance to protect himself and facilitate a restructure. The firm's client assets are secured. That was a condition." He paused. "I'm not indifferent to collateral damage. I try to limit it." Try. "There are no guarantees in surgery." She considered that. The waiter appeared, a person of such practiced discretion that she was almost startled, and they went through the business of menus and wine with the specific domestic normalcy of two people doing a thing they've done before, which they had not. But it felt strangely like they had, or like they were the kind of people who could fall easily into the rhythms of a shared table. When the waiter withdrew, she said, "I had a friend come to my office Monday morning, a journalist." Something in Moretti's posture didn't change, and also changed. The quality of his attention shifted slightly, like a frequency adjustment. "Who?" "Angela Reyes, Tribune." "I know who she is." A pause. "What did she want?" "She wanted to know what I was doing with you." Serena looked at him directly. She's been working a piece on your operation for 14 months. She says she has sources inside 3 separate federal investigations. She does? He said. None of them will produce anything that can be printed. Because you'll make sure of it. Because what they know isn't what they think they know. The federal investigations Angela Reyes has sources in are investigating an organization that I restructured out of existence 4 years ago. He said it without defensiveness. What I run now is not the same thing it was under my father. The mechanisms are different. The exposure is different. But the relationships are the same. Relationships don't restructure. Something at the corner of his mouth moved. That's a structural feature, not a bug. She thought about that. She said a source relocated, moved cities. I know about that. He picked up his wine glass. That was not my doing. There are other people with interests in keeping the investigation unfocused. I don't control everything in the ecosystem around my name, Ms. Vale. Serena. A small beat. Serena. She liked the way he said her name. She noted that she liked it and filed the notation somewhere she'd have to examine later. What do you want from me? She said. Not the question from the car. That one had been about the evening. This was the full version of it. He set down the wine glass. He looked at her with the same direct, patient attention she'd first seen in the dark of the library, and it had the same specific quality. Not soft, not gentle, but precise. Like someone who has decided to see a thing clearly and sees it. I want to have dinner with you, he said. And after that, I want to have another dinner with you. And I want to find out who you are at a pace that neither of us is uncomfortable with. That's very measured. I'm a measured person. You orchestrated the financial destruction of my ex-fiancé within 24 hours of meeting me. That was, he paused, somewhat less measured. Somewhat. The food arrived. They ate. She had not expected him to be a good dinner companion and found that he was, not in the performing way, not in the way of a man who has decided to be charming as a strategy. He asked questions and then listened to the answers. He had opinions that were not conventional and stated them without the defensive preamble of someone waiting to be argued with. He told her about the first building his father had ever developed, a warehouse conversion on the South Side in 1971 that was still standing, still occupied, still his. He did not talk about the other things. She did not ask about them yet. Yet. She noted the word when it appeared in her mind. They were midway through the main course when her phone buzzed. She'd silenced it, but she felt it. She ignored it. It buzzed again. She glanced down, intending to silence it fully. The text was from Angela. It said, "Call me, now. Do not make any other calls before you call me." She looked up at Moretti. "I need to step out for a moment." His expression didn't change. "Of course." She went to the corridor outside the glass doors and called Angela. Angela picked up on the first ring. "Where are you right now?" Angela said. Serena paused. "Why?" "Because I just got a call from a source I haven't spoken to in 18 months, who reached out specifically because he saw a photo of you with Moretti from the gala and wanted to know if I knew you." Angela's voice had the controlled urgency of someone who has received a piece of information and is still processing what it means. "He told me something that I am not going to print, Serena. I want you to understand that. This is me telling you as a friend." "Tell me." Moretti isn't the only person who was watching Grant Mercer. Serena was quiet. "There's a man named Victor Crane. He's connected to a distribution network, import-export, the kind of language that means something else when you say it in certain rooms. He and Mercer had a financial arrangement that Mercer was apparently trying to exit from. The offshore structures that are under federal investigation, some of those entities are connected to Crane." "Okay." "Okay isn't the right response, Serena. Grant Mercer was laundering money for Victor Crane, and he was trying to stop laundering money for Victor Crane, which in the world that Crane operates in is not a situation that resolves with a lawsuit." A breath. "Moretti and Crane are not friends. They haven't been for a long time. My source thinks that what happened this week, the federal inquiry, the clients leaving, all of it, my source thinks Moretti didn't just go after Mercer. He went after Crane's structure through Mercer, and now Crane knows it." Serena stood in the corridor. Below them, 42 floors down, Chicago continued its ordinary business. "What does that mean?" she said, though she already knew. It means that whatever you are to Moretti right now, Angela said, Crane is going to find out. And if he thinks you matter to Moretti, you become a pressure point. Serena said nothing. Are you hearing me? I'm hearing you. Where are you? She looked at the glass doors. Through them she could see the table, the window, the city below. She could see Moretti at the table, not looking toward her, his posture the same steady patience, waiting. I'm somewhere I need to think about, she said. Serena, I'll call you tomorrow. She hung up. She stood in the corridor for a moment, the walnut paneling, the soft light, the muffled quiet of a building insulated against the city it sat inside. She thought about the gala, the library, the card, every decision that had led her from the navy dress in the cold October air to standing in a corridor 42 floors above a city she'd lived in her whole life, holding a phone with a man on the other side of a glass door who had, she was now understanding, not only rearranged Grant Mercer's life, but detonated something considerably larger in doing it, and hadn't told her. She pushed through the glass doors. She walked back to the table. She sat down. Moretti looked at her. Whatever he read in her face, something behind his eyes shifted. Victor Crane, she said. The name landed. She watched it land, watched the specific quality of his stillness change. Not surprise, not fear, but the adjustment of a man who has been playing a long game and has just learned which piece on the other side of the board has moved. Where did you hear that name? He said. His voice was exactly the same. That was somehow more alarming than if it had changed. Does it matter? Yes. A journalist friend. She kept her eyes on his. She told me that what you did to Grant wasn't only about Grant, that there was a structure underneath him that you went after, and that the man who owns that structure is now aware that you went after it. A long silence. Through you, she said. Through me. Through the photo and whatever story is already forming around why Damian Moretti was standing next to a woman at a charity gala the same night her ex-fiancé's offshore account started bleeding. Moretti set down his fork. He looked at her steadily. I should have told you, he said. Yes, you should have. I made a calculation. Don't. The word came out hard, not loud. Hard. Don't explain it as a calculation. You made a choice, and the choice was to bring me into something without telling me what I was being brought into. He was quiet. Something in his jaw shifted. You're right. She hadn't expected the flatness of it. No qualification, no argument, just, you're right. She looked at him. He looked back. What happens now? She said. With Crane. That's something I'm managing. You were managing it last week too, apparently. I was. And I didn't know. You didn't. A pause. Serena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly. She waited. Are you going to leave? The question was so direct it almost stopped her breathing. Not because it was inappropriate, because it was the only question that mattered right now, and he'd asked it without packaging it in anything. She looked at the city below them. 42 floors of distance between her and the ordinary world she'd occupied a week ago. The world where the worst thing in her evening was a cruel man in a charcoal tuxedo calling her soft in front of people who would remember it. She looked back at him. She didn't answer. Not because she didn't know the answer. Because the answer was forming in her chest with the specific physical weight of something that has been true for longer than you've been willing to admit it, and saying it out loud in this room, at this table, with this city spread out below them like evidence of everything that existed outside the careful bubble of the last 7 days. Saying it out loud would make it a fact she couldn't walk back from. Moretti waited. He was good at waiting. It was the most unnerving thing about him. I don't know yet, she said finally. It wasn't the truth. It was the closest she could get to the truth while still being able to breathe. Something moved through his expression. Not disappointment, not relief, something more complicated than either. He picked up his wine glass and set it down without drinking from it. That's an honest answer. I'm an honest person. I know. A pause. It's one of the things that makes this complicated. She looked at him. What does that mean? It means that I'm not accustomed to complicated. He said it without self-pity, Just fact, stated in the same register as everything else he said. The people in my life are either useful or they're not. They're either trustworthy or they're not. The categories are clear. You don't fit the categories. That sounds like a problem. It is. The corner of his mouth shifted. I find I don't particularly mind. She should have said something to that. She didn't. She picked up her fork and they finished the meal in a silence that had changed register. No longer the silence of an argument in progress, but something more like the silence of two people who have said enough for one evening and are allowing the fact of each other's presence to do the rest of the work. The car took her home at 11:15. He did not ride with her this time. She didn't ask why, and he didn't explain. She sat in the back of the black SUV alone and watched Chicago move past the windows, and thought about Victor Crane and Angela's voice on the phone and the specific quality of Moretti's stillness when she'd said the name. She thought about the question he'd asked. Are you going to leave? She thought about the answer she hadn't given. She was still thinking about it when she unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside and found that the lock had already been turned. She stopped in the doorway. The apartment was dark. She always left the kitchen light on. She had left the kitchen light on when she went out at 7 o'clock, and she could see from the door that it was off. Every instinct she had went very quiet and very alert at the same moment. She did not reach for the light switch. She stood in the doorway with one hand on the doorframe and let her eyes adjust and cataloged what she could see. The shape of the couch, the coffee table, the dark rectangle of the window. Nothing moved. She reached for her phone. I'd put that away, said a voice from the dark. She did not scream. The sound that came out of her was something below a scream, a compression of breath, involuntary. The body's response to something it has classified as a threat before the conscious mind finishes the sentence. A lamp clicked on. The man sitting in the chair by the window was somewhere in his mid-50s. He was heavy-set in the way of someone who had been built for physical work and then graduated to directing it. His hair was silver gray and cut close. He was wearing a dark suit that was well-made and entirely without personality, like a uniform that had learned to impersonate clothing. His face was the face of a man who had spent decades ensuring that what he felt never showed on it, and had largely succeeded, but there was something in the set of his eyes, a pale gray blue that was almost colorless in the lamp's light, that communicated something specific and cold. He was sitting with the posture of a man in his own space. Ms. Vale, he said, I'm sorry for the intrusion. Sit down, please. I'm going to stand. That's fine. He said it agreeably, like a concession that cost him nothing. My name is Victor Crane. I think you may have heard it recently. Her heart was doing something complicated in her chest. She kept her breathing even through conscious effort, the way she'd learned to keep her voice even in rooms full of hostile clients. Regulate the breath. The rest follows. Or doesn't, but at least you look like it does. I've heard it, she said. Good. Then I don't need to spend time on introduction. He glanced around the apartment with the brief, assessing look of someone pricing things. You have a nice place, small but sensible. You're not someone who lives beyond her means. I respect that. What do you want? I want to have a conversation. He tilted his head slightly. Just a conversation. I'm not... A gesture, open palm, that was supposed to read as harmless. I'm not here to frighten you. I want to talk about Damian Moretti. She did not move. I don't know Damian Moretti. You had dinner with him tonight. He said it without any particular emphasis, like reading from a schedule. Aurelius, 42nd floor. You left at 11:10. His driver brought you home. You came upstairs alone, which I have to say I found encouraging. The word encouraging landed with a specific weight. What do you want? She said again. Flat. Not a question this time. Crane looked at her steadily. I want you to understand something about the man you've been spending time with. Something that he hasn't told you. Because I think you're an intelligent woman, and I think if you had the full picture, you would make different decisions. He paused. I'm offering you the full picture. Out of the goodness of your heart. Something moved in his face, not quite a smile. Out of mutual interest. She crossed her arms. She'd moved 2 steps further into the apartment because standing in the doorway had started to feel like it communicated something she didn't want to communicate. She stopped at the edge of the kitchen and kept the island between herself and the chair. "Talk," she said. Crane settled back slightly. 7 years ago, Damian Moretti and I had a business arrangement, a productive one for both parties. The Moretti organization had infrastructure that I needed: transportation, warehousing, certain relationships with Port Authority, and I had capital and connections that they needed. It was clean. It worked. He paused. 4 years ago, Moretti decided to restructure. His word. He wanted to go legitimate: hotels, development, the whole performance. Fine. Businesses evolve. The problem was that in restructuring, he chose to exit our arrangement in a way that left me exposed. Exposed how? 3 of the entities we'd built together were wound down without proper accounting. Assets moved in ways that weren't documented as they should have been. When certain investigators began looking at my operations, they found edges where those entities had been that pointed toward me without pointing toward him. His voice stayed even throughout all of this, the voice of a man describing an administrative grievance. Moretti cleaned himself up by making the mess land on my side of the line. Serena said nothing. "I'm not telling you this to make you sympathize with me," Crane continued. "I don't need your sympathy. I'm telling you this because this is who he is. He makes calculations. He decides what serves him and he executes it. And the collateral damage, the people who get exposed, the people who take the weight, that's not something he loses sleep over." "Why are you in my apartment?" "Because Grant Mercer was a liability I was in the process of managing," Crane said, and for the first time an edge crept into his voice. Small, controlled, but present. He wanted out of our arrangement. I was negotiating the terms of that exit. It was a delicate process, and it required time and discretion. Moretti decided to accelerate the timeline by going to the federal investigators with information he had no business having, and in doing so he didn't just destroy Mercer, he destroyed the timeline I needed. He destroyed the discretion. A pause. And he did it in a way that roots back to a woman he met 6 days ago. Serena's stomach turned. "The photo from the gala," she said. "The photo, the car ride, dinner tonight." Crane spread his hands slightly. "A story is being constructed, Ms. Vale, whether you know it or not. The story is that Damian Moretti has a personal interest in the exposure of Grant Mercer. The story needs a reason for that personal interest that investigators can follow. You are the reason." The room felt smaller than it had 30 seconds ago. "He used me," she said. The words tasted like something metallic. "He used the situation," Crane said. "Whether he used you specifically, I think that's a distinction you'll have to work out for yourself." He stood. He was taller standing than he'd looked in the chair. He moved toward the door with the unhurried ease of a man who knows he's said what he came to say. "I'm not asking you to do anything tonight. I'm asking you to think about what you know, what you don't know, and who benefits from the story that's currently being written with your name in it." He stopped at the door. He turned back. "One more thing," he said. "There is a woman named Dara Voss. She was a logistics coordinator for one of Moretti's transportation companies until about 3 years ago. She left his employ and shortly afterward relocated, as your journalist friend may have mentioned." His pale eyes were flat and direct. "I'd encourage you to find out why she left, what she knows. Moretti won't tell you, but the information is not difficult to locate if you know where to look." He reached into his jacket and set a card on the small table beside the door. "When you're ready to have a different conversation, call that number." He left. The door closed. Serena stood in the middle of her apartment and did not move for a full 30 seconds. She could feel her pulse in the palms of her hands, which was a thing that only happened when her body had received a shock it was still processing. She looked at the lamp he'd turned on. She looked at the chair he'd been sitting in. She looked at the card he'd left beside the door. She did not touch the card. She went to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water and stood at the sink and drank it and looked at the wall and thought about Dara Voss. She didn't sleep. She sat on the couch in the dark with her laptop and she searched, and what she found wasn't dramatic. It was the opposite of dramatic. It was the specific mundane footprint of a person who has trimmed their digital presence to the minimum. A LinkedIn profile that hadn't been updated in 3 years. A Facebook account with locked privacy settings. A mention in a 2-year-old community newsletter from a neighborhood in Indianapolis. Dara Voss, 36, former logistics professional, now apparently living quietly in a city 6 hours from Chicago. Serena closed the laptop at 2 in the morning. She sat in the dark. She thought about what Crane had said. He used the situation. She thought about Moretti at the table, the directness of him, the specific quality of his attention that she'd read as honesty. The way he'd said, "You're right," without qualification when she'd confronted him about not telling her about Crane. The way he'd asked, "Are you going to leave?" with the flatness of someone asking a real question. She thought about the fact that she was in this at all. She'd walked into a library to collect herself after being humiliated by her ex-fiancé, and she'd walked out attached to something she did not have the full dimensions of. She'd made a series of small decisions, answering the phone, getting in the car, keeping the card, saying yes to Thursday, and each small decision had compounded into a position she was now in that had a man in her apartment and her name somewhere in a federal investigation's narrative architecture, and a woman named Dara Voss in Indianapolis who knew something Serena was going to have to find out. She didn't call Moretti. She should have called Moretti. She didn't. In the morning, she called into the office and told Priya she'd be working remotely. She made coffee. She opened her laptop. She found a phone number for Dara Voss through a people search service that she paid for with her personal card and did not put through the firm's account. She called it. 3 rings, then a woman's voice, cautious. "Hello? Is this Dara Voss?" Serena said. A pause. "Who's calling?" "My name is Serena Vale. I'm not a journalist. I'm not with any law enforcement or any investigation. I'm a private citizen who has recently become adjacent to someone you used to work for, and I'm trying to understand something." A longer pause. "How did you get this number?" "A people search service. I wasn't trying to be covert about it." Another pause. Then, "Who did you say you were adjacent to?" "Damian Moretti." The silence on the other end of the line had a quality. Not the silence of someone who didn't know the name. The silence of someone who knew it so well that hearing it still did something to their breathing. "I can't talk to you," Dara Voss said. "I know you don't have to. I know you don't know me. I know you have every reason to hang up." Serena paused. "I just need to know one thing. Did he hurt you?" The silence stretched. "Not the way you mean," Dara Voss said finally. "Not physically." A breath. "He made a decision that there was a situation with Crane's people, and Moretti knew about it before it happened, and he chose not to. He could have moved people out. He knew what was coming, and he made a calculation that moving people would reveal that he had a source inside Crane's operation that he didn't want to reveal." Her voice was controlled in the way of someone who has told this story to themselves so many times, it has become something they can deliver without falling apart. 3 people in the warehouse on Damon Avenue got hurt. One of them was my brother. He's okay now. He's okay. But that night they didn't know if he would be. Serena pressed one hand flat on the kitchen table. "Moretti came to see me afterward," Dara continued. "He paid my brother's medical bills. He paid for his rehab. He was not indifferent. I want to be accurate about that. He wasn't indifferent. But he made the choice he made, and my brother paid for it, and I couldn't keep working for someone who I knew had made that calculation." A pause. "So I left." "Did he try to stop you?" "No." A beat. "He let me go. He paid severance. He made sure I was placed somewhere. He told me to be careful. He told me that if I ever needed anything." She stopped. "That's the thing about him. That's the part that doesn't make sense in any of the simple versions of who he is. He's not a monster. He's also not safe. Those 2 things don't cancel each other out." Serena was very still. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because you asked me directly," Dara said, "and you sound like someone who needs the real answer, not the comfortable one." She thanked Dara Voss and ended the call. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time. He made a calculation. She'd heard those words twice in 12 hours. Once from Crane about Moretti's decision to exit their arrangement. Once from Dara Voss about a night in a warehouse on Damon Avenue. The specific repetition of the phrase across 2 entirely different sources was not something she could attribute to coincidence. She thought about what Moretti had said to her, about 30% arrangement, about trying to limit collateral damage. Try. There are no guarantees in surgery. She thought about Angela's source relocating. She thought about it differently now. She was still sitting there when her phone rang. Moretti. She let it ring. It stopped. 30 seconds later, it rang again. She picked up. Something happened last night, he said. No preamble. Yes, she said. It did. A pause. He heard it in her voice, she could tell. The specific quality of a voice that has been somewhere in the night and come back changed. Are you all right? I need you to come here. She said it before she'd finished deciding to say it. My apartment. Now. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He was there in 17. She buzzed him up without speaking through the intercom. When she opened the door, he came in and looked at her first. A quick, comprehensive assessment. And then looked at the apartment. His eyes found the chair by the window, the lamp that was still on from the night before. She watched him process it. He was here, Moretti said. Crane. He turned. Something had shifted in his face. Not anger, not quite, but something several degrees colder than what she'd seen from him before. His jaw was set. When? Last night, after I got home. She crossed her arms. She was not going to cry. She was furious, and she was frightened, and she was not going to cry. He was sitting in that chair when I came in. He'd already been inside for, she didn't know how long, some amount of time. Christ. Moretti moved 3 steps toward the window and stopped himself. He turned back. Did he touch you? No. Did he threaten you? Not explicitly. She looked at him. He told me about Dara Voss. That landed. She watched it land, differently than when she'd said Crane's name at the restaurant. This was not the controlled shift of a man recalibrating a chess position. This was something raw, something that cost him something. What did he tell you? Moretti said. Enough that I called her this morning. A silence. Dara Voss is in Indianapolis, Serena said. She told me about her brother. She told me about Damen Avenue. She told me about the choice you made. Moretti was very still. She didn't tell me it made you a monster, Serena continued. Her voice was level. She was working very hard to keep it level. She was precise about that. She said you weren't indifferent. She said you're not a monster and you're not safe, and those things don't cancel each other out. She looked at him. I'd like you to tell me she's wrong. He looked back at her. He did not tell her she was wrong. Sit down, she said. He sat, the couch. She took the chair across from it. Not Crane's chair, the other one. She sat, and she looked at him, and he looked at her, and between them, the air had the specific compressed quality of a conversation that has been building since before either party knew there was a conversation coming. Tell me what happened on Damen Avenue, she said. He told her. He told it flatly and completely, and without the mitigation she'd expected, without the reasonable-sounding framework that would have made his decision comprehensible from the outside looking in. He had a source inside Crane's distribution network. The source had told him that Crane intended to send people to a warehouse on Damen Avenue to recover assets from a deal that had gone sideways. Moretti had known there were workers in that warehouse. He had also known that revealing the source would end the source's life. He had calculated the risk to the warehouse workers against the value of keeping the source active, and he had made the choice. The workers were hurt, he said. The intent was intimidation, not serious harm. Crane's people weren't sent to kill anyone, but it became physical. My source told me afterward that it went further than Crane intended. He paused. That is not a justification. I'm stating the facts. Did you know there was a chance of serious injury when you made the choice? Yes. And you made it anyway? Yes? She looked at her hands. Why are you telling me this without softening it? Because you didn't give me the option of softening it, he said. And because you've asked me to tell you what's true. I'm not in the habit of doing that. I'm telling you because you asked, and because I think... He stopped, started again. I think you deserve it more than I deserve the protection of leaving it soft. She looked up. Crane wants something from me, she said. He left a card. He said, when I'm ready to have a different conversation. Don't call that number. I know. She held his gaze. What does he want from you? Not from me. From you. He wants me to surface information that would redirect the federal investigation away from his operations and toward a competing network. Moretti's voice was flat. In exchange, he would disengage from the situation around Mercer. Let the existing legal process run its course without introducing further complications. And you said no. I haven't spoken to him directly. He's communicating through a pause. Alternative channels. His eyes held steady. I'm not going to give him what he wants. Even if it puts me at risk. The words dropped like something hard onto a hard surface. He didn't look away. I'm moving resources to make sure you're protected. Starting today. You won't see most of it, but it will be there. I didn't ask to be protected, she said. I asked if you're going to put me at risk. I'm trying to answer both questions. Answer the one I asked. A long silence. Yes, he said. Staying near me carries risk. That's the honest answer. What Crane did last night, coming here, being inside your home before you arrived, that was a message. Not to you, to me. He's telling me he can reach the things that are near me. He paused. The risk is real. I won't tell you otherwise. She thought about this. She pressed one hand against the arm of the chair. You should have told me before Thursday, she said. Before dinner, before any of it. I had a right to know what I was walking into. Yes. You keep agreeing with me. Because you keep being right. She made a sound that was almost a laugh and wasn't. Moretti. Damien. She stopped. Damien, she said. The name in her mouth felt different than she expected, more specific, like a key that fit something. He looked at her. There was something in his face she hadn't seen before, something beneath the flat directness, something effortful, like a man holding a door open against a strong wind. Tell me what you need, he said. I need... She stopped. She looked at the chair by the window, at the lamp, at the card on the table by the door that she hadn't touched. I need to know who you are when a choice like Damon Avenue isn't on the table. When there's no calculation to make. When it's just, she gestured imprecisely, this. This. You, being a person, without the machinery. He was quiet for a moment, then, I don't have a lot of practice with that. I know. She met his eyes. Practice with me. Something in his face shifted, the effortful thing, the door against the wind. He looked at her with something that was so stripped of the usual architecture of his expression that it was almost hard to look at directly, the way you can't look directly at certain kinds of light. She looked anyway. Her phone rang. She glanced at it. Angela. She held up one finger to Moretti and answered. Tell me you're home, Angela said. I'm home. Is he with you? A pause. Yes. Serena. Angela's voice had the controlled urgency again, but pitched differently, pitched higher. I need you to listen to me very carefully. My source called me again this morning, the one from last night. Okay? Victor Crane has been meeting with Grant Mercer. The room went still. Mercer is not just a bystander in the Crane organization, Angela said. The offshore structures, the ones under federal investigation, my source says some of the documents in those structures have signatures, not Mercer's signature, not Crane's signature. A breath. They have Moretti's father's signature from 12 years ago. And they were structured in a way that, if someone presented those documents to the right investigator with the right context, they could be used to suggest that the current Moretti operation is a continuation of the original arrangement. Serena looked at Moretti. Crane isn't going after your ex, Angela said. Crane is going after Moretti, and he's using the federal investigation as the weapon, and Mercer has the documents. Where is Mercer? Serena said. That's the thing. A pause. He reached out to your firm this morning. He left a message for you specifically. He said he needs to talk to you. He said... Angela's voice dropped. He said he has something that affects you directly, and he doesn't trust anyone else. Serena pulled the phone from her ear. She looked at Moretti. She watched his face as she said, "Grant Mercer has documents that could destroy you, and he's asking to meet with me." Moretti went very still in the way she'd only seen once before, at the restaurant, when she'd said Crane's name. But this was different. This was not the stillness of a man recalibrating. This was the stillness of a man who has just seen the shape of something he should have seen coming, and that was the thing she would come back to later. The specific quality of his stillness in that moment. Not the stillness of a man surprised. The stillness of a man who has been waiting for a particular shape to appear on the horizon and has just watched it arrive, and who is now measuring the distance between where he stands and where the thing is going to land. He stood up. "Don't call Mercer back," he said. "He called the firm's general line," Serena said, "not my cell. Which means he doesn't have my cell. Which means he's being careful about what he puts on a traceable number." Moretti was already moving toward the window, not looking out of it, but using the wall beside it, the way she'd noticed he used contained spaces when he was thinking, not pacing, but positioning. He knows his phones are monitored. Whatever he has, he doesn't want it on a line that gets pulled into the investigation record. So he calls a PR firm. He calls you. Moretti turned. Not the firm. You. Because you're the one person he thinks he can reach, who has a reason to listen and a reason not to immediately hand everything to the wrong people. He doesn't know She stopped. He doesn't know about this. He might. Moretti's voice was flat. Crane might have told him. Crane and Mercer are meeting. If Crane is using Mercer to get to me through you, Mercer may know more about the current situation than his voicemail suggested. She looked at him. Or Mercer is trying to use Crane's situation to get to you himself, separately. Moretti was quiet for a moment. Yes. Two different men, she said slowly, both trying to use me as the path to you, for different reasons. Using different leverage. Yes. And I'm in the middle of it because I walked into a library 2 weeks ago. He looked at her. Something moved in his face, not guilt. He wasn't built for guilt, but something adjacent to it. Something that recognized the weight of what he'd set in motion by making the decisions he'd made. Yes, he said. Just that. No mitigation. She pressed her palms flat on her thighs. She could feel the heat of her own skin through the fabric. Her pulse was doing something uneven. She breathed through it. I'm going to meet him, she said. No. I'm not asking. Serena. His voice had an edge she hadn't heard before. Not anger. Something more controlled than anger, and therefore more alarming. Mercer has documents that Crane wants. Crane knows Mercer is trying to contact you. If Crane is watching Mercer, and he is, then the moment you walk into a room with Grant Mercer, Crane knows it, and Crane will know that whatever Mercer has is moving. Then we use that, she said. He stopped. She looked at him steadily. Crane wants a meeting with you. He wants you to redirect the investigation. He's been sending messages, cuts, my apartment, the photo, all of it, because he wants you to feel the pressure and respond to it. She stood. What if you respond to it? But on your terms. And Mercer is the mechanism. Moretti looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before, not in the library, not at dinner, not this morning. It was the expression of a man recalibrating his understanding of who is in the room with him. You want to set a meeting, he said. I want to surface the documents in a controlled way that exposes Crane's play before he can execute it. She felt her mind moving the way it moved when she was managing a crisis. The specific rapid clarity of it, the way the pieces arranged themselves into sequence. Mercer has documents that Crane is using him to hold, but Mercer called me, not Crane's people. Which means Mercer is scared of Crane. Which means Mercer is looking for a way out that doesn't end with him being managed out of the problem. Crane doesn't negotiate exits, Moretti said. Mercer should know that. Mercer is desperate, she said. Desperate people believe what they need to believe. She looked at him. If I meet with Mercer and he gives me the documents, or copies of them, and we get them to the right hands before Crane's people realize the transfer has happened, the right hands being Angela Reyes. She said it before she'd finished thinking it through, and then thought it through and found it held. She's been working this for 14 months. She has federal sources. If those documents land with her, she can verify them, she can contextualize them, and she can publish in a way that makes their existence public before Crane can weaponize them privately. Moretti crossed the room in 4 steps. Not toward her, past her. He stopped at the kitchen counter and put both hands on it and stood with his back to her. And she watched his shoulders and the set of his neck and understood that she'd said something that had collided with something inside him that he was working through. "The documents implicate my father," he said. His voice was different, lower. The professional flatness of it was still there, but something underneath it had shifted. "Whatever's on them, signatures, structures, arrangements, my father built that. He built it the way he knew how to build things, before I restructured. I know. If those documents go public, the story is about Crane using them to coerce you," she said. "That's the story, not what's on them. The story is that a man with a criminal distribution network has been blackmailing a legitimate business figure with documents he's been holding through a compromised third party." She moved to stand where she could see his face. "That's a different story than whatever Crane wants those documents to tell." He looked at her. "You've done this before," he said. "It's what I do. You manage public narratives. I manage what's true about a situation, and I find the frame that lets the truth land in the most useful way." She held his gaze. "That's not spin. The situation with Crane is real. The coercion is real. Mercer's fear is real. All I'm doing is determining which of those real things gets told first." A long silence. "If this goes wrong," he said, "I know what happens if it goes wrong. Serena, if this goes wrong and Crane's people know that Mercer moved those documents through you, Crane was already in your apartment once. The next time he sends someone, it won't be for a conversation." She looked at him. She looked at him with the full weight of what she understood and did not flinch from it. "I know." He looked back at her, the effortful thing again. The door against the wind. "Why?" "Because I'm already in it," she said. "You told me that last night. That the risk is real. That staying near you carries it. I didn't leave. I'm still here. So either I'm in this as a passive thing that things happen to, or I'm in it as someone who does something about the situation she's in." She paused. "I don't know how to be the first one." Something in his face changed completely. The architecture of his expression, sir, the careful management of it, the specific professional distance he maintained between what he felt and what he showed, dropped for approximately 3 seconds. She saw what was underneath it. Not softness, something more structural than softness. Something that looked like a man who has spent a very long time not needing anyone to be present with him in a situation and has just encountered the specific shock of the opposite. Then it was back. The control, the steadiness. "Call Mercer," he said. "Tell him you can meet this afternoon, somewhere public, somewhere neither of us controls." He moved back toward the couch. "I'll be close. You won't see me. But if anything, I know." She picked up her phone. She called the firm's number, got Priya, got the callback number Mercer had left. She dialed it. It rang twice. "Serena," Grant's voice. The compressed quality of it was worse in daylight, more naked. "Grant?" she said. "What do you have?" A pause. "Not on the phone." "Then tell me where." He named a coffee shop in River North. Neutral ground. She'd passed it 100 times. She said 2 o'clock. He agreed without negotiating. That told her something. A man negotiating from strength haggles on the details. He took the first terms offered. She hung up. She looked at Moretti. He was already on his own phone, saying something in a low voice to whoever was on the other end. He finished the call and looked at her. "My people will be positioned before you arrive," he said. "The man who drives you, Ren, he'll be outside. If at any point something feels wrong, you walk out and get in the car. I know how to leave a building. I know you do. Something almost wry in it. Almost. I'm telling you because I need to say it. Humor me." She put on her coat. They left her apartment together. On the sidewalk in the October noon light, Chicago going about its loud, ordinary life around them, she turned to look at him. He was watching her with the same careful attention, and she thought about what Dara Voss had said. He's not a monster. He's also not safe. Those two things don't cancel each other out. She thought about the fact that she was about to walk into a coffee shop to collect documents from her ex-fiancé that could bring down a criminal distribution network and simultaneously complicate the life of the man standing in front of her, whose father's name was on those documents. And she was doing it because it was the only move available to her that kept her from being something that had things done to it. She thought about the navy dress. The wrong choice. She made better ones now. "I'll see you after," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded, once, and turned and walked east, and she turned and walked toward the cab that Wren had already pulled to the curb. The coffee shop was the kind of place that existed in the gap between chains and independent, predictable lighting, moderate noise, the specific anonymous hum of a space that sees hundreds of people per day and remembers none of them. She arrived at 1:53. She got a coffee she didn't intend to drink and took a table in the middle of the room, not in a corner, visible from the door and from the counter, because visible was safer than sheltered, and she'd learned that from managing enough situations where the instinct to hide had made things worse. Grant arrived at 2:01. He looked like a man who'd aged 6 years and 6 days. The tuxedo precision of the gala was gone. He was in a dark coat over a collared shirt, and his hair had the quality of hair that had been run through by hands too many times. His jaw was shadowed. His eyes, when they found her across the room, had the particular red-edged quality of eyes that have not been closed enough. He sat down across from her. He did not get a drink. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Don't." She set her coffee down. "Don't thank me. Tell me what you have." He looked at her. Something in his face did something complicated. The specific expression of a man who was about to say something he'd rehearsed and had just realized the rehearsal was inadequate. "Serena, I know I don't have any right to ask you for anything." "Correct, but you're here, so ask." He put a hand inside his coat. He produced a flash drive, small, gray, the kind that cost $8 at a drugstore. He set it on the table between them and put his fingers on it, but didn't push it toward her. "There are 47 files on this," he said. "Corporate formation documents, wire transfer records, and correspondence going back 12 years. The structures are Crane's. He had me maintain them through a network of shelf companies that my firm administered." He looked at the drive. "When I tried to exit the arrangement, Crane told me he had documents inside those same structures that carried the Moretti family's signature. He told me that if I didn't cooperate, those documents would go to federal investigators in a package that would implicate Moretti's current operation as a continuation of the original arrangement." He paused. "He was using me to get to Moretti, and I let him, for longer than I should have." "How long have you been working for Crane?" He pressed his lips together. 7 years. 7 years. She looked at him. "Did you know what you were laundering?" "I didn't ask." His voice was flat, ashamed in the specific register of shame that has been sitting so long it has become part of the furniture. "I knew it was irregular. I knew the structures were designed to obscure origin. I didn't ask because I didn't want to know." "And when you finally did know?" "When Crane had me move a specific transfer, and the transfer amount and the source made it impossible to—" He stopped. "I knew at that point, and I tried to exit, and that's when he showed me the Moretti documents." Serena looked at the flash drive. "Everything on there is Crane's structure," Grant said. "His shelf companies, his wire records, the correspondence between his people and my firm. Everything. It'll take down his entire operation if it goes to the right people in the right way." He paused. "The Moretti signatures are also on there. I'm not going to pretend they're not. But the context—" He looked at her. "The context makes clear they're historical, 12 years old, predate Moretti's restructuring. Crane's people repackaged them to look current. That repackaging is also on the drive." She looked at him. "Why me?" "Because you're the only person I know who has a reason to get this to Moretti," he said, "and who is also capable of making sure it doesn't just disappear into someone's private safe." He looked down at the table. "And because I owe you something. I know I can't—" He stopped. His hands, flat on the table, pressed harder against the surface. "I know what I said to you at the gala. I know I've been saying versions of that for years. I know you have every reason to walk out of here." She looked at him. really looked at him. She looked at the man she had once believed in enough to say yes to, the man who had spent 2 years telling her in 100 small, precise ways that she was insufficient, who had said what he'd said in a room full of people with the gentle voice of concern and meant every word of it as a blade. She did not feel rage. She did not feel sorrow. She felt the specific emotional blankness of a thing that has been processed so completely it no longer has edges to catch on. "I'm not here for an apology," she said. "I'm here for the drive." She reached across the table and took it. Grant's fingers released it without resistance. He looked at her hand closing around it with the expression of a man watching something leave him that he knows he has no right to hold. "What happens to me?" he said. It wasn't quite a question. "The federal investigation proceeds," she said. "Your firm's administration of Crane Structures is on that drive along with everything else. You'll need a lawyer." "I have one. A better one." She put the drive in her coat pocket. "If you cooperate fully with investigators and the testimony you provide helps dismantle Crane's operation, your counsel can probably negotiate terms that don't end with you in a federal facility." She paused. "I'm not promising you that. I'm telling you what the landscape looks like from where I stand." He nodded slowly. There was something in his face that she hadn't seen there in all the years she'd known him. Not exactly contrition. Contrition was too clean a word for it. Something rawer, something that looked like a man finally standing in the actual dimensions of what he'd built, and finding the room much smaller and darker than the blueprints had suggested. Serena. He said her name with the weight of everything that needed to be said and the specific inadequacy of the person saying it. "Don't," she said. She stood. She buttoned her coat. "Take care of yourself, Grant." She walked out. The cold hit her like a wall. Ren was at the curb. She got in the car and sat for 3 seconds, and then took the drive out of her pocket and held it in both hands, and felt its $8 weightlessness, and thought about 47 files in 12 years, and a man who had spent 7 of those years not asking because he didn't want to know. She called Angela. "I have something," she said when Angela picked up. A pause. "What kind of something?" "The kind that takes down Victor Crane's distribution network and contextualizes 12 years of financial documentation in a way that changes the story." She paused. "Can you verify financial documents?" "I have 3 forensic accountants I use as sources." "How fast?" "Depends on volume." 47 files. She heard Angela breathe. "Give me 24 hours." "You have 12. She looked out the window at Chicago. "Angela, this is real. The documentation is complete, but Crane is going to know the drive moved. How fast can you publish once you verify?" "If it's what you're describing, same day. We hold the presses if we have to." "Okay." She thought for a moment. "I need a secure way to get this to you." "Where are you?" She gave Ren the address Angela named. He pulled into traffic without a word. She texted Moretti. "It's done. Drive transferred. Moving to next step." His response came in 40 seconds. "Where?" She told him. He sent back, "I'll be there in 10. He arrived in 8. Angela's apartment was a third-floor walk-up in Wicker Park that looked exactly like the apartment of a journalist who had been doing the same obsessive work for 15 years. Organized chaos, the kind of filing system that made sense only to its architect, 3 monitors on the desk, and a corkboard on the wall that had been added to and subtracted from so many times the backing had started to separate from the frame. She looked at Moretti when he came in, and Moretti looked at her, and something passed between them that was not warmth and was not hostility, but was the specific mutual assessment of 2 people who have been circling the same territory from different sides. "You're shorter than your reputation," Angela said. "You're exactly what I expected," Moretti said. Angela looked at Serena. "I like him," she said, in a tone that indicated this was a diagnosis she would have preferred not to make. She held out her hand. Serena gave her the drive. They spent the next 4 hours in Angela's apartment. The forensic accountant Angela called arrived at 4:30, a compact, precise woman named Gloria, who shook no one's hand and went directly to the drive and the laptop she'd brought and said nothing for the first 90 minutes. Moretti stood at the window. Serena sat on the floor with her back against the couch because the chairs were occupied by stacked files, and she didn't want to move anything, and Angela moved back and forth between Gloria's station and her own desk in the kitchen, where the coffee maker ran continuously. At 6:15, Gloria looked up. "The crane structures are complete and traceable," she said. "I can document the flow from source to shelf company to destination across 18 separate wire sequences. The repackaging of the older Moretti documents is actually sloppy. Someone put these together in a hurry. The metadata on the repackaged files shows they were modified 11 days ago. The underlying documents are 12 years old. That's not hidden. Anyone looking at these with the right tools will see it in under an hour." Moretti didn't move from the window, but something in his posture changed, a slight release of something that had been held. "Crane knows this drive exists," Serena said. "How long before he moves?" "He already has," Moretti said. Everyone looked at him. He turned from the window. He was looking at his phone. "Ren just sent me something." He looked up. Crane's people picked up Grant Mercer 20 minutes ago. The room went very quiet. "Where?" Serena said. "His apartment building. Parking garage." Moretti's voice was flat. He's not hurt, as far as Ren's contact can confirm. But he's with Crane's people, and Crane now knows the drive is gone." Angela looked at Serena. Serena looked at Moretti. "How long do we have?" Angela asked. "Until Crane decides that the drive being gone is better managed by eliminating the context around it." He looked at Angela directly. "How long to write the story?" "I have enough to start," Angela said. "Gloria, how fast can you get me a summary I can cite?" 2 hours. "I can write around the gaps and fill as I go." Angela was already at her desk. "I need 3 hours total, from right now." "You have 2, Moretti said. "Then I need you both out of my apartment," Angela said, not looking up. "You're taking up oxygen." They left. Outside on the sidewalk, the night had come fully down. October cold, the wind off the lake doing what it did, the city going about itself in its loud, indifferent way. Serena pulled her coat tighter. Moretti stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Mercer," she said, "my people are on it." His voice was controlled. "He'll be moved before Crane decides he's a liability. You can do that? Right now?" "Yes." She looked at him. The specific certainty of that word. Not performed confidence, not bravado, but the flat, factual confidence of someone who has infrastructure and knows it, and is not interested in pretending otherwise. "After this," she said, "when it's done, I want to talk about Damon Avenue." He looked at her. "I know. I'm not building a case against you. I just need to understand the full dimensions of who you are. All of them." "I know," he said again. Something in it was different the second time, more weight to it. Her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. She looked at Moretti. "Answer it," he said. She answered. "Miss Vale." Victor Crane's voice, as smooth and professionally neutral as it had been in her apartment, as if nothing in the intervening 18 hours had altered the temperature of anything. "I think we need to have that conversation now." She kept her voice even. "I'm listening." "The item that changed hands this afternoon. I'd like it returned. In exchange, I'm prepared to make certain arrangements that would be beneficial to everyone currently involved in this situation, including you." "What arrangements?" "Mr. Moretti and I have a history of finding mutual accommodation when the circumstances require it." A pause. "The circumstances require it now." She looked at Moretti. He was watching her, not the phone, reading her face with the focused attention of someone whose job has always been to understand what's happening beneath the surface of what's being said. "I don't have the item," she said. "It's already in motion." A silence. "Ms. Vale." Something changed in Crane's voice. The professional neutrality was still there, but underneath it, something colder, something that was done performing patience. "I would encourage you to consider carefully what in motion means for the people around you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact of physics," Crane said. "Things in motion encounter resistance." She looked at Moretti. He held out his hand. She put the phone in it. Victor. His voice was something she hadn't heard before. Not the flat professional tone of the restaurant, not the directness of her apartment. Something older, something that had a history in it. The specific register of two men who have known each other long enough that the pretense of neutrality has worn through to whatever is actually underneath. You were in her home. She couldn't hear Crane's response. She watched Moretti's face. No, Moretti said. We're past that. A pause. You want to talk about accommodation? Here's the accommodation. You release Mercer in the next 30 minutes, and you disengage completely from this situation, and the documentation goes to federal investigators with a cover letter from my attorney contextualizing its origins. A pause. Or the documentation goes to the Tribune tonight, in a story that leads with the coercion, and whatever federal investigation picks it up in the morning gets it without context. A longer silence. The story runs either way, Moretti said. The only variable is whether you're in it as the subject or as a footnote. He ended the call. He handed the phone back to her. She looked at him. That was not the plan. The plan changed. Crane is going to call his attorney in the next 4 minutes, Moretti said. And his attorney is going to tell him the same thing I just told him, which is that the documentation is already verifiable. The repackaging of the historical files is visible to any forensic accountant, and the coercion narrative is the story regardless of whether he cooperates. He paused. Crane is a rational actor. Rational actors don't take positions that cost them everything to protect a play that has already failed. You're betting everything on him being rational right now. Yes. He has Grant Mercer in a parking garage. Mercer will be out within the hour. I have people already moving. She looked at him in the October dark. The wind doing what it did, the city going about its business around two people standing on a Wicker Park sidewalk making decisions that would land in federal records and newspaper archives, and whatever came after this for all of them. What if you're wrong? She said. He looked at her, the effortful thing, the door. Then we find out together. Her phone rang again. Angela. I need you to see something, Angela said. She sounded different, tight. Not on the phone, come back up. They went back up. Angela's desk had the specific organized chaos of someone who has been moving fast. 3 windows open on the primary monitor. Gloria was gone. Angela was standing at the desk with her arms crossed, and she turned when they came in. I found something in the files that wasn't in the original brief, she said. Serena crossed the room to look at the monitor. The Shelf Company network, Angela said. The outermost layer. The companies that received the clean money at the end of the laundering chain. She pointed to a column on the screen. 7 of them are still active. They were never wound down when Crane restructured his U.S. operations 2 years ago. They're still filing, still receiving deposits. She looked at Serena. The beneficial owner of record on all 7 is listed as a Delaware holding company called Venn Atlantic LLC. Serena looked at the screen. Venn Atlantic LLC, Angela said, was incorporated 8 years ago. Its registered agent is a law firm in Wilmington. Its sole director is listed as, she tapped the screen, a man named Thomas Reed. Serena didn't recognize the name. She looked at Moretti. He had gone completely still. Not the chest position stillness, not the door against wind stillness. A different stillness entirely. Moretti. Her voice was careful. Who is Thomas Reed? He looked at the screen. He looked at it for a long time. His jaw was tight. She could see the muscle in it from where she stood. Thomas Reed, he said quietly, is my attorney. The room went the specific, silent quality of rooms in which something irreversible has just been. Moretti's hand was on the back of Angela's desk chair. Not gripping it, just resting there. But the knuckle of his index finger had gone white. Serena watched him process it. She'd learned, over the past 2 weeks, to read the architecture of his stillness. There were varieties of it, each one communicating something different to someone who knew how to look. This one was the stillness of a man standing in the wreckage of something he had built with complete trust and finding that the foundation had been wrong from the beginning. How long? He said. Not to anyone in particular. Angela pulled up another window. Venn Atlantic was incorporated 8 years ago. If Reed has been the registered director since incorporation, 8 years. Moretti said it the way you say a number when you're converting it into a different unit. 8 years of cases, 8 years of counsel, 8 years of a man sitting across a table from him, knowing which documents existed and who had signed them, and where the structural weaknesses were and what the exposure looked like, and carrying all of that knowledge in 2 directions simultaneously. He's the one who made the repackaging sloppy, Serena said. Both Angela and Moretti looked at her. The metadata, she said. Gloria said someone put those files together in a hurry 11 days ago. Crane's people wouldn't rush that. They'd have done it carefully. But Reed, she thought it through as she said it, Reed is an attorney. His instinct is documentation, not tradecraft. He'd know what needed to be in the package, but he'd underestimate the forensic visibility of the metadata, because that's not his field. She looked at Moretti. He's been feeding Crane information from inside your operation for 8 years, but assembling the coercion package himself, that was outside his competency. He made mistakes. Moretti was looking at her. Something moved through his face, not gratitude, something more complicated. The specific expression of a man watching someone else see a thing clearly that he was too close to see. Call him, Serena said. What? Call Reed. Right now. Tell him you know. Don't tell him what you're going to do about it. Just let him know the information has moved. She paused. The only play Crane has left is the coercion package, and the only person who can reassemble it quickly enough to matter is Reed. If Reed knows you know, he doesn't move. He freezes. Because his exposure is worse than Crane's. Crane is a criminal who operated criminally. Reed is an attorney who violated privilege and fiduciary duty and fed protected client information to a criminal organization for 8 years. She looked at him steadily. He goes to prison for that. He knows it. Make sure he knows that you know it. Moretti looked at her for a long moment. Then he took out his phone and called his attorney. It rang 4 times. Then, Damien. Thomas Reed's voice, practiced warmth, 20 years of practiced warmth. Venn Atlantic, LLC, Moretti said. Just that. Just the name. Silence. I'm giving you the opportunity to not make this worse, Moretti said. Sit down and don't move. He ended the call. He set the phone on Angela's desk. The 3 of them stood in the apartment in the specific suspended quality of a moment between one thing ending and the next thing not yet having begun. Outside the window, Wicker Park went about its night. A car passed. Someone was laughing on the sidewalk below. The ordinary world, doing its ordinary work, indifferent. I need 45 minutes, Angela said. Right, Moretti said. She wrote. Serena sat on the floor again, back against the couch, and Moretti sat in the one cleared chair, and they did not speak for a long time. The sounds of Angela working filled the space. Keys, the occasional murmured reading aloud of a sentence being tested, the sound of a phone call made and kept brief. At some point, Moretti's phone buzzed. He looked at it. Something in his face released by a fraction. Mercer's out, he said quietly. She nodded. He's shaken, but... A pause. Intact. She thought about Grant in the parking garage, the compressed voice on the voicemail, the flash drive sitting on a coffee shop table between them. She thought about the man he'd been for the 7 years he'd been not asking because he didn't want to know. And she thought about the man he'd looked like when he'd let the drive go, and she found that what she felt was not satisfaction and not sorrow, but something quieter than either. Something that felt like the specific relief of a wound that has finally been cleaned out. It hurt the way that hurt. But it was clean. At 9:47, Angela looked up from her desk. It's done, she said. She said it the way people say it when they mean something specific and complete. Not, I'm finished. Done. Show me, Moretti said. She turned the monitor. He read. He read for 4 minutes without speaking, and Serena watched his face move through the story that had been built from 47 files and Gloria's forensic summary and 14 months of Angela's sourcing and the specific brutal clarity of a journalist who knows how to make a complicated thing legible. The headline was, Crane Network Exposed: How a Chicago Attorney Helped a Criminal Empire Blackmail Its Way to Legitimacy. The Moretti historical documents, Serena said. How did you handle them? Paragraph 9, Angela said. I contextualized them as 12-year-old documentation predating the Moretti Group's corporate restructuring, repackaged by Reed 11 days ago as part of a coercion scheme. The metadata is cited. Gloria is quoted as an anonymous forensic accounting source. She paused. The story isn't about Moretti's father. The story is about what Crane and Reed did with those documents. That's what's newsworthy. That's what I can defend. Moretti looked at the screen for another moment. Then he looked at Angela. Thank you. Angela looked at him like he'd said something in an unexpected language. Then she looked at Serena, then back at him. Don't thank me. This is the story I've been trying to write for 14 months. You're the ones who handed me the documents. She turned back to her monitor. I'm filing in 10 minutes. You should both not be here when that happens, for reasons that I think are obvious. They left. The night air was the same brutal October cold. They stood on the sidewalk, and Serena felt the specific exhaustion of a body that has been running on adrenaline for hours and has just been informed by its own systems that the crisis has passed and the bill is due. Her feet hurt. Her hands were cold. Somewhere behind her eyes, a headache was beginning to build with the patient inevitability of weather. Come on, Moretti said. Where? Somewhere warm. He looked at her. That's all, just somewhere warm. They went to his building. Not a hotel. An apartment, high up, with windows that did what the restaurant windows had done. The city spread out incomprehensible from a height that gave you enough distance to see the shape of it. The apartment was not what she'd expected, and then she reconsidered and thought that it was exactly what she should have expected. Spare, ordered, the furniture chosen for quality rather than display, the shelves holding books that had been read rather than arranged, a kitchen that had been used, a space that a person actually lived in. He made coffee. She sat at the kitchen counter on a high stool and watched him do it. The specific, ordinary domestic movement of it, a man finding mugs and measuring coffee and running water, and felt the strange, compressed tenderness of watching someone you've only known in extremity do something entirely ordinary. Reed will turn himself in by morning, Moretti said, his back to her. He doesn't have another option. The story will be online by midnight. His name is in it. His choices are cooperation with federal investigators or a defense that requires him to testify against his own documented record. He poured water. He'll cooperate. And Crane? Crane will do what Crane does. He'll lawyer up, he'll deny, he'll negotiate. He's been preparing for a federal case for years. Everyone in his position has a contingency. He turned, set the mugs on the counter. He'll spend the next several years in a legal process that limits what he can do, which is not justice exactly, but it's the available version of it. She wrapped her hands around the mug. The heat of it was specific and grounding. What about you? She said. He sat on the other side of the counter. He looked at his own mug for a moment before picking it up. The historical documents are contextualized now. The repackaging is documented. Whatever investigation picks up the story in the morning is going to be focused on Crane and Reed. He paused. My attorney of 8 years has been working against me for 8 years. I'll need to understand the full scope of that before I can know what it cost. He looked at her. That's going to take time. Are you all right? He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. No, he said. Not right now. She looked at him. The flatness of that answer. The decision to give her the real one instead of the managed one. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. They drank their coffee. The city went about its nighttime business below them, 40-something floors of distance between them and it, the grid of Chicago lights doing what it always did, making the enormity of the ordinary world both visible and bearable by giving it a shape you could see from far enough away. I need to ask you something, she said. Ask? The choice at Damon Avenue. She held his gaze. If you had it again, knowing what you know now, who was in that warehouse, how it went, Dara's brother, would you make the same choice? He was quiet for a long moment. No, he said. She waited. I would find another way to protect the source, he said. Or I would accept the loss of the source. What I wouldn't do, he stopped. I've been running these calculations for 20 years, source value against exposure risk, asset against liability, the algebra of it. I've gotten very good at the algebra. He looked at his hands. I got so good at it, I stopped noticing that I'd stopped factoring in the things that can't be quantified. The people, she said. Yes. She looked at him. The man across from her was not the man in the library, so not entirely. The library version of him had been controlled in a way that was total, the specific impenetrability of someone who has built their exterior so carefully and maintained it so long it has become load-bearing. This version, sitting in a kitchen at 10 o'clock at night, 8 years of betrayal, 3 hours old, holding a coffee mug. This version had visible cracks in it. Not weakness. Something more honest than weakness. The cracks of a structure that has been under real load and is showing the honest evidence of it. She thought about what she'd said to him. Practice with me. She thought about what he'd said. I don't have a lot of practice with that. She thought about 2 weeks ago. A navy dress that was the wrong choice. A library. A man in a dark corner who had listened to everything and chosen not to look away. I'm staying, she said. He looked up. I'm not... She paused, finding the exact words. I'm not telling you it's simple. I'm not telling you I've resolved everything I know about you into something comfortable. I know what you are. I know what you've done and what you're capable of doing, and I know that what you told me about Damon Avenue is not the only version of that story that exists in your history. She held his gaze. I'm staying because I've looked at the full picture, and I've decided that the full picture of you is worth the complication. Not because I think you're safe, because I think you're real. He looked at her. The effortful thing was gone. The door, the management of it, all of it was gone, and what was underneath was not what she'd expected. She'd expected something harder. What she found was something much more exposed. The face of a man who had spent so long being seen only as the thing he'd built to be seen as, that the experience of being seen differently had no established response in him. He didn't know what to do with it. That, more than anything else, was what she believed. I don't know how to do this, he said. The words were very quiet, stripped of everything. I know. She set her mug down. Neither do I. We'll figure it out. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached across the counter and put his hand over hers. Not a performance, not a gesture calibrated for effect. Just a hand, warm from the coffee mug, resting over hers with the simple, specific weight of a person deciding to be present. She turned her hand over. They sat like that for a while. The city below them. The night doing what nights do. In the morning, a gray October morning, the sky, the particular undecided color of a city that can't make up its mind between rain and cold, the story ran. Angela's byline. The headline exactly as she'd written it. By 7 a.m., it had been picked up by the AP wire and 3 national outlets. By 8, a federal spokesperson had confirmed an ongoing investigation into Crane's operations and indicated that new documentation had been received and was under review. By 9, Thomas Reed's attorney had issued a statement confirming that his client intended to cooperate fully with investigators. Serena read it all from Moretti's kitchen, sitting at the same counter with a second cup of coffee and her laptop open, the professional part of her cataloging the story's structure and sourcing, with the habitual detachment of someone who has spent her career on the other side of this specific moment. She noted what Angela had done well. She noted what a more hostile publication might have done differently. She noted the paragraph about the historical Moretti documents and the careful, precise language Angela had used to contextualize them. And she thought about the conversation in this kitchen, and the question she'd asked, and the answer he'd given, and what it had cost him to give it straight. He came out of the back of the apartment at 8:30. He'd slept. She hadn't, entirely, but she'd tried. He looked at the laptop, at the story on the screen, and she watched him read the headline without touching the machine. He poured coffee. He sat. Reedy's cooperation is confirmed, she said. I know, my new counsel called at 7. A pause. Former counsel. He picked up the mug. It'll take months to understand the full scope of what he passed to Crane. Every case, every document, every piece of strategic advice over 8 years needs to be examined with the assumption that the other side had access to it. That's a significant project. Yes. He looked at the window. Some of what I thought I'd secured, relationships, arrangements, positions, some of that was secured with information that Crane had. He may have been managing those relationships against me for years without my knowing. He paused. The reconstruction is going to be expensive, in every sense. Do you have people who can do it? I'll find them. Something in his voice was different than it had been. She noticed it without immediately categorizing it. Then she did. The voice of someone who has made a decision and has not yet said it out loud but has already felt the weight of it settle. I'm going to step back from certain operations, he said. Not everything, but the infrastructure that depends on the kind of relationships Reed could exploit. I'm going to reduce my exposure there. She looked at him. Because of what happened? Because of several things. He looked at her. Because I've been running the same system for long enough that its vulnerabilities have become structural. And because... He stopped, set the mug down. Because I told you last night that I'd stopped factoring in the things that can't be quantified. I'd like to stop being someone who does that. She held his gaze. She didn't say anything. Some things don't need the weight of words added to them. He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he looked at the city in the morning light, the gray October sky, the buildings doing what buildings do, holding their positions, bearing their loads, staying upright under the specific accumulated pressure of everything the city asks of the things it builds. 3 weeks later, Serena stood in the conference room at Elevate PR and delivered the Whitmore Foundation's quarterly communication plan to Marcus and his board. The plan was good. It was the best work she'd done in a year, precise, structured, anticipating the questions before they were asked. She knew this not because anyone told her, but because she could feel the difference between the work she did when she was managing herself and the work she did when she wasn't spending half her energy on that management. She'd always been good. She was better now. Something had shifted in her orientation toward herself, not dramatically, not in the way of a person who has undergone a transformation she can describe in clean sentences. More like a rebalancing. The specific rebalancing that happens when you stop compensating for a weight you've been carrying so long, you forgot you were carrying it. Grant Mercer entered into a cooperation agreement with federal investigators in the second week of November. His testimony formed part of the evidential package that supported formal charges against 3 of Crane's senior operational figures. The firm bearing his name was wound down in an orderly process managed by Doyle, who had indeed departed before the collapse, and who had, true to Moretti's prediction, protected himself and the client assets in the process. Grant's personal outcome was not resolved quickly. These things never were. But the cooperation agreement was the beginning of a process that his new attorney, a considerably better one, navigated with the specific methodical competence of someone who had done this before. Serena did not hear from him again. She did not expect to. She found that she did not need to. Victor Crane was indicted in December on 11 federal counts. His network, as Angela's story and the subsequent investigation demonstrated, had been considerably more complex than the single distribution operation the earlier investigation had been examining. The unraveling of it took time and resources, and generated a sequence of further stories, several of them bylined to Angela. And the work of the next year and a half of Angela's professional life was in many ways an extended elaboration of what had been assembled in one night in a Wicker Park apartment in October. Angela and Serena had dinner in November. A real one, not rescheduled. They sat across from each other in a restaurant Angela chose, and they talked for 3 hours, and the first 40 minutes were not catching up, but something more immediate. 2 people who had been in the middle of something together processing the fact that they had come out the other side of it, and that the friendship, which had thinned and stretched over years of parallel busyness, had found its tensile strength when it needed to. "He's good for you," Angela said. Not warmly, exactly. In the manner of a journalist stating an observed fact. "You don't even know him. I know how you sound when you talk about someone you're thinking about. You sound like someone who's thinking, not performing." She picked up her wine. "That's new." Serena looked at her. "I'll take it," she said. On a night in late November, when Chicago had committed to winter with the specific resignation of a city that has been through this before and knows it has no choice, Serena stood at the window of Moretti's apartment and looked at the city below. The lake was invisible in the dark, but she could feel it out there, the cold breath of it pushing against the glass. The grid of lights, the ordinary world doing its ordinary work. He came to stand beside her. They stood together at the window for a while without speaking. That was something she'd learned about him. Not the deliberate version of silence, the managed version, but the other kind, the kind that is simply two people in the same space who don't need to fill it. She'd learned that about herself too. She'd always been good at managing rooms, managing conversations, managing the flow of interaction. She was learning to be somewhere without managing it. It was harder than she'd expected and more valuable than she'd anticipated. "Darvas called me last week," he said. She turned. "What?" She saw the story. She called, not to talk about Crane or about what happened, just to... He paused. "She said she hoped I was well, that's all. 2 minutes. She said she hoped I was well, and she asked how her brother's name could be kept out of the continued coverage. Is it something you can do?" "It's done." He looked out the window. "I should have called her myself, a long time ago." She looked at his profile in the city light, the scar below his cheekbone, the jaw, the specific gravity of him that had reorganized the proportions of every room she'd seen him in. "You'll have other chances to be the person who calls," she said. He turned to look at her. She looked back. This was the thing she hadn't known how to name for the first 2 weeks, and had finally found the language for, not in a single moment, but gradually, the way language sometimes arrives. Through the accumulation of small, specific moments that eventually reach a critical mass and become something you can hold. He saw her. Not the version of her that had been assembled for rooms like the Whitmore Gala. Not the competence, not the professionalism, not the quiet management of her own presence that she'd been doing since she was old enough to understand that certain rooms required it. He saw the rest. The ordinary, specific, imperfect rest of her. The woman who'd stood in a fitting room in a navy dress and made herself believe something she didn't quite believe. The woman who'd walked into a library to collect herself and walked out into something she hadn't chosen and couldn't walk back from. The woman who'd spent years being told in the careful language of concern that she was not quite enough, not quite the right shape or size or register for the room she was trying to occupy. He saw all of it, and he had not once, in 2 weeks of crisis and revelation and the specific intimacy of surviving something together, asked her to be smaller. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, everything. "Thank you," she said, "for the library." He looked at her. "I was just sitting there." "I know." She turned back to the window. "That's what I mean." The city went about its business below them. The lake breathed its cold breath against the glass. Chicago doing what Chicago does. Enduring, adapting, staying upright under pressure, finding its way through the specific darkness of every winter toward whatever comes after. They stood at the window together, the two of them, imperfect and present and entirely real. Outside, the first snow of the season had begun to fall. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the quiet, unhurried way of things that have decided to arrive and are not in any particular hurry to announce themselves. It fell on the city's grid of lights and blurred the edges of things, the way the first snow always does, making the known world briefly unfamiliar, and therefore, for a moment, capable of being seen again. Part 2.